8:30 Eastern Time. Let's get going. Welcome to the morning meeting. Sean Spicer and Tim Hogan with me to give you a fill-in on what's going on today. Centerpiece of the day, at least as we see it from this morning, is President Biden's expected phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu. I believe, based on what I've heard, it will happen before noon Eastern. Not sure exactly when. And then, of course, we'll have to see where the readouts come, how quickly we hear from both sides, the American side and the Israeli side, about what went on. Vice President Harris is going to North Carolina today. We're going to talk about that. A lot of focus in Team Biden's world on seeing if they can get the North Carolina electoral votes to replace losses that they see potentially coming elsewhere. And Congress is not in. And I have no idea what Donald Trump is doing today, but we might figure that out during our time together. So let's get started. Sean and Tim, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Sean, you first. How do you see the White House's current position with Benjamin Netanyahu facing criticism from left and right? What's the path out for them, both substantively and politically?
I think before yesterday, it was a lot different. After this incident with Jose Andres' aid workers getting killed, that really, I think, recaptured America's attention. Obviously, Americans getting brought into this, and somebody as prominent as Jose Andres bringing it to the forefront, not just nationally, locally, but worldwide, I think is going to change the dynamic. It gives Biden a whole different sense of being able to be outraged and to lay into Netanyahu a little bit more. The issue is, I think this is, and I'll let Tim get into this, I think it's more of a Democrat issue than it is a Republican issue in terms of turnout and concern. Speaking purely politically, there's the humanitarian side of this, there's the military side of this, but then there's just the political side. The political side, I think, is more of a Democratic issue than a Republican one.
Tim?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I tend to agree. I think the focus is on the current administration and how it's handling crisis in the Middle East. I think we'll see what happens with this call. I would not be surprised if President Biden takes a little bit more of an aggressive posture on the call. We've seen some communications from White House staff that indicate that he's outraged, extremely upset. And I think that this call is another avenue to communicate that. But it is worth noting, I mean, it's a diplomatic tightrope in this situation. It's a very tenuous, delicate situation. But I do think, politically, it is more of a problem for Democrats currently. It is harder to draw a contrast to say what would happen if you inject Donald Trump back into the situation, even though I think Democrats can take that posture in terms of communicating to the progressive left and trying to bring them back together.
Mark, the one thing I would add that's a little bit different on this call than probably any other one is that Netanyahu himself is going to, and I want to be politically sensitive on this, I think he's going to be very sensitive to how he deals with this criticism because they were wrong. They did kill these people. And so unlike previous calls where there might be a bit of a dispute as to what was said or how Netanyahu is going to react or how hard Biden did, I think Biden's going to want to express his outrage, his concern, and then Netanyahu, my guess is to come out and say, I agree with you. This wasn't handled correctly. We were wrong. We are conducting an investigation. I heard the president out. But Netanyahu, unlike previous calls that might come down to strategy and getting people on either the side of the Israelis or the Palestinians, et cetera, this one, they know they were wrong, and he needs to maintain the support of the American people, especially people on the right. And so how he comes out of this is going to be much different than how he might have come out if this was just a situation as it was last week, whether or not to go into Rafah and win.
When you say retain support on the right, you talking about Netanyahu or Biden?
Netanyahu.
Yeah. As long as he keeps going on Fox, I think he'll retain support on the right.
But I think he'll maintain a lot of it. Yeah. But I think the point is that what happened yesterday, when you start killing Americans, I think the dynamic changes with Jose Andres being out there so publicly, sharing his concerns. I think it tweaks the dynamic.
Right. So we've heard Joe Biden is outraged about the border. He's outraged about inflation. He's outraged about this and that. Now, staff tells Politico he's outraged about this. Does it help his cause to show the outrage actually himself as opposed to just having aides say he's outraged? Why aren't we seeing him being outraged? Is it because he isn't or he can't, or because they think that's not good for solving the problem? Tim, why wouldn't we see him being outraged?
I would not be surprised if we see a little more from him publicly, but I think the reality is that it's a tinderbox of a situation, and Israel is a staunch U.S. ally. We stand with Israel and their right to defend themselves. This is obviously a horrific situation. I mean, you're seeing briefings from the Defense Department and the Pentagon showing a similar level of outrage, but somewhat calculated in the sense that this is such a delicate diplomatic tightrope of a situation.
Right.
So it's just, going out there full bore is very difficult.
Can I make one prediction? I wouldn't be surprised if they wheel him out, put him at the podium. He says, I spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu. I expressed my outrage. I told him that he needed to do 1, 2, 3, and then doesn't take questions and goes back. Now, is he capable of not answering a question? I don't know, but I think that's a risk. But I do agree that seeing him is a much more effective tool from a communication standpoint than putting it in writing. The question is, can they get him to agree not to take questions and go down?
How about this? They put the lectern right in the doorway. And so the minute he finishes, they just shut the door.
I feel like the reaction to her report showed us that it's not very easy for him to.
That's why I brought it up here.
We'll bring everybody in, and folks have questions about Israel. We'll talk about it, but I want to switch to the Electoral College. Vice President Harris is going back to North Carolina today. The president doesn't have a very robust public schedule. He's doing a Greek event tonight, but why all this focus on a state they lost last time where the polls don't show them doing particularly well? To me, it's the Electoral College math. They have to be on offense somewhere. And if those who say they're going to lose Georgia are right, you need those electoral votes. So talk to me, guys, about North Carolina and how smart it is or not, in your view, to keep going in North Carolina.
Yeah. I think North Carolina is interesting. I think you're right. They do have to be on offense. I also think this is a moment where the vice president is going there to make an actual announcement of substance. And we're thinking about it, obviously, in terms of battleground states, geographic relevancy. But they're announcing $20 billion, a huge chunk of money that's getting deployed from the Inflation Reduction Act. And the reason they're going to North Carolina is one of the awardees there has a home base there. And so this is about, electrifying school buses. This is about EV charging stations. This is about multifamily housing, making it more affordable for people who struggle with their bills. So there's a political aspect of it, but there's also this, what has Joe Biden done for me lately aspect of it, where we're constantly talking about whether or not the White House is communicating effectively. And I think that is the underlying really important thing here is, can that message break through? In these events state by state.
Tim, let me ask you, if you were thinking about the Biden campaign, do they have a better chance now to win North Carolina than Georgia?
I think Georgia's still in play.
But is it more in play than North Carolina or less?
I think Georgia's more in play than North Carolina.
You do. Sean, do you agree with that?
No, I hope they agree with Tim.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with Sean, just for the record.
Yeah.
I think Georgia's too tough for them.
So a couple things. One is, remember, we're very early historically in this general election. So you get some free shots. You can go to a couple places and see what moved the needle, what kind of reaction you get. We're still so early in this general election. The second thing I would say is that it's free, right? When you do, as Tim pointed out, a public event like this, if it's not tethered with the campaign, it costs.
Yeah, although she's doing a fundraiser too, so they got to pay for part of it, right?
Okay, but it's minimal.
Yeah.
Third is, I think there's a migration piece that's happened over the last few years that I think they're testing. How many people have moved to North Carolina, especially in the Raleigh area, that might put things in play? Trump did not win big here. I mean, This was still a close state.
Yeah.
So how much has migration helped there? RFK getting on the ballot, I think, is a big deal. They need to see whether or not, with that shaking out, does that make a difference? With Mark Robinson at the top of the ticket, how's that going to? I think this is the perfect place to test a few things. And then I think that the bigger thing that I would just leave with is there's a difference in strategy. I think many of the folks in the media are still focused on how many stops does Trump make versus Biden make. Trump makes news wherever he goes. He makes national news. He doesn't need to do a rally in every single place every minute. I think the Biden campaign is still, for a lot of reasons, we have to do 5 stops in a state, really get local attention. Trump doesn't need to go to Raleigh, Durham or something or to Charlotte to get North Carolina attention. He can get it. He gets it every day on all the channels that he needs.
Right. The other thing this points up to me is if the metrics of success of these trips is news coverage and inspiring the base and reaching voters more broadly, you still have a 4-to-1 advantage on the Democratic side, right? You've got the vice president and his spouse. You've got the president and spouse. You've got Donald Trump, and his spouse doesn't campaign, and he's got no vice president. So, candidate. So, is that a big advantage to these kind of events, non-presidential? Do the other 3 surrogates, do that make a difference or no?
I mean, I think so. I think they get to travel right until we get Vice President Tulsi Gabbard on the ticket officially. Then yeah, it's Trump in a courtroom, and to Sean's point, I agree. Trump is still able to generate attention in a way that is incredible, and no other politician has been able to do. I think, though, much more than previously, like in the primaries in 2015 and the race in 2016, the content of what he's doing and the fact that he's tethered to a courtroom and, has to walk out after being reprimanded by a judge and stand behind a bike barricade and yell at the cameras. I don't think that plays well going forward once people start paying attention. He can still get the attention. I just don't think it's going to be good.
Let me ask you both one electoral college question, and then I want to talk briefly about Nebraska, and then look at a couple polls, and then open it up to everybody else.
By the way, those are both electoral questions. Then.
Yeah. So if you take the 7 states that are most competitive, North Carolina, on down, are either of you willing to push any of them out of pure toss-up at this point? And if so, which ones and which direction? Are there any? Like, Sean, you and I pushed Georgia favored Trump, not pure toss-up, right? So that's one. I think Pennsylvania, pure toss-up. Wisconsin's pure toss-up. What do you think about those? Do you agree those two are pure toss-up and likely will stay that way? Pennsylvania and Wisconsin? You guys agree with that?
I don't think there's anything outside the margin of error right now, and that's why I'm saying it's so early.
In all 7.
Yeah, there's nothing that I would say if you went to any one of those 7. I actually have it at 8. I include New Hampshire, but regardless, I don't think anything is out. There's all of these polls in the battleground poll show them either in the margin of error or just outside.
So you think all 7, and in your delusional adding of New Hampshire, you think all 8 you just basically consider toss-up, like no advantage to either one?
No. Like, look, if you had me sit down with, on the 270 to win map and push, I would push Georgia. I would push Arizona. I think Pennsylvania is a pure toss-up. I think Wisconsin, I mean, honestly, I think on any given day could go either way.
That's why we call it a pure toss-up, John.
What?
That's why we call it a pure toss-up.
No. But you're asking what I'm saying is, if I had to push it.
You would push Georgia and Arizona and none of the others, I'm sensing, which is where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim?
Arizona, I mean, Nevada, I would say is a lean.
Yeah. But not push. And what about Michigan? Michigan, in my reporting, Michigan goes anywhere from it's over, Trump's going to win it, to Biden's going to pull it out. You guys have a feeling about that?
If you want to bet me $10, I'll put Trump on Michigan, but yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't move any of those states out of toss-up contention. I mean, like states like Nevada, even if you feel like there's a lean there. I mean, it worked in such a long time. It's always that polling always seems to skew Republican. You got numbers coming out of Clark County that show that Biden's going to lose it by like 8 points. That's not going to happen.
Sean, if New Hampshire's in play, Trump's going to win in the landslide.
Okay, thank you.
So Sean, let me just ask you about Nebraska. Like changing the rules in Nebraska, if you can do it, seems like a great idea. Win another electoral vote automatically. Why they wait till the last minute? I don't understand why they're trying to rush it through with the clock ticking. Why didn't they do this a year ago? They've controlled the legislature and the governor. Why not? You don't know?
I think it's a great question. I mean, because I think sometimes it's, I mean, look, I think part of it is sometimes in the heat of a campaign, no one thinks, hey, we should call the governor of Nebraska. We should call these 5 state senators. Somebody says it and you go, well, how much time's on the clock? So I mean, the answer is, I don't know the answer to that. I think just a lot of folks on the right are giving Charlie Kirk credit for it.
I know, but it seems insane that Charlie Kirk has to step up and say, hey, let's do this. It's like a year ago, somebody should have said, hey, let's just take an electoral vote. Now, Maine might have then followed suit, but it just seems nuts to me that they're scrambling to do this. It just seems basic. All right. Lastly, let's look at a couple polls. There's a national poll that from Marquette Law School. I've never really understood why Marquette Law School does national polls, but that poll had Trump up 4 the last time they did a survey. Now they've got Biden up 4, national poll. And then there's a Pennsylvania poll out this morning that's got Biden ahead by 10. Now, we all know Biden's not ahead by 10. Franklin and Marshall, those are both decent pollsters. You guys disagree with that? Franklin and Marshall and Marquette Law, they're decent.
I'm just going to say Biden's up 10 in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you are. I know. So he's not up 10, but directionally, these match with some other national polls. President Biden went around long enough saying I'm ahead in national polls, and now it's true, right? There are 5 credible national polls that show him ahead. So are you both prepared to say at this point, looking at these 2 polls and the others and just the general direction, not validating the exact data, are you guys prepared to say that Biden, since the State of the Union, has closed the gap?
Yeah, he's improved his position. There's no question. I don't know that it was the State of the Union itself, but I think there have been a variety of conditions, improving economic conditions that have helped with that.
Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that what the battleground polls that we continue to see, especially out of like Wall Street Journal one yesterday, shows that where it matters, maybe not. Again, you see Trump outside the margin of error in some of these states. So where he's doing nationally, sure, but at the end of the day, it sort of doesn't really matter that much. I mean, yes, having the tide go with you is helpful, but I question how much it really matters.
Well, they're all within the margin of error because, as you know, if the margin of error is 4, it's 4 for both sides, so that's 8, and he's not winning by 8 anywhere. The only battleground state poll I've seen where somebody was winning by more than 8 is this Franklin and Marshall poll that shows Joe Biden up 10 in Pennsylvania. All right, let's open it up, folks. If you've got a question, raise your electronic hand. We'll ask you to then unmute your microphone and get in. You can ask about anything going on in politics or topics we talked about today or other stuff. This is for you, so don't be shy. Raise your hand, and we'll unmute you, and you'll get to ask whatever you want. You can direct it to any one of us or to all of us, whatever you prefer. And a question from Sandra. Please unmute, ask away, or make a comment, whatever you'd like.
Okay, I really appreciate that you do. Can you hear me?
We hear you great. Go ahead.
I really appreciate that you invite someone like me who's just a voter from the state of Pennsylvania, especially.
Sandra, if you're a voter in Pennsylvania, you know, you should have your own show, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm a token Democrat from my town, okay? I'm the Democrat. They come to have a local person sign the petition to get them on the ballot. All right. But I am a disappointed Democrat in a way. I will vote for Joe Biden. But as I listen to you, which I really appreciate the insight, when it comes right down to it, if I was undecided, which there are a lot of undecided in my family who was traditionally Democrat. If it comes down to it, and to pull that lever, after listening to everything you've said, I think that I would say, okay, will Joe Biden or Donald Trump be a better person nationally, internationally and foreign policy? Because I think he will have a shit show. But I will pull that lever for Democrat, but I really don't know if my family members will. So and people don't listen like I'm listening to you.
Yeah, understood. Sandra, thank you. Tim, if you're the Biden campaign and you hear what Sandra just said, does that freak you out a bit?
No, that actually makes me feel great. I think there are a lot of soft Democratic voters out there who are still considering options. It's early, and they can't imagine walking into a voting booth and pulling the lever for Donald Trump.
Now, I see at least one Biden person on here. Maybe they'll call Sandra and her family today and ask them to Sandra, thank you. Jordan, question, comment, please.
Yes, it's directed to everyone. I'm particularly interested, though, in Tim's response to this. In presidential years, there are kind of 3 dates that people start to pay attention and the needles start to move. It's Memorial Day, and people look at gas prices. 4th of July, you look at food. Labor Day, you're looking at back-to-school supplies. In particular, what benchmarks, I guess, does President Biden need to hit to be able to edge out Trump? And as an addendum, Bloomberg just put out a great poll, survey results, that in swing states in particular, fentanyl deaths are increasingly becoming the top issue for swing state voters. So how does President Biden address those issues to win over these?
Cost of a Snoopy pencil box, I think, is the key item. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple things there. One, a lot of the economic indicators are heading in the right direction. This is something that people have said is a little bit of akin to 1948, right? When we had a lot of inflation in the post-war era, people were extremely upset. But around the same calendar time, we started to see prices come back down. And granted, it was much worse back then than it was now. But economic indicators like, lower unemployment, record small business, real wages starting to catch up. Those are all things that there is going to be a trend for over months. I think we're headed in the right direction. So cross those dates.
Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say I think what Jordan pointed out is important, right? That people make up their mind when to vote much earlier. Now we're looking at probably August, September, what they think is who they're going to vote for. So those conditions going into the summer are going to be important. We just saw a report this morning coming out. Egg prices are back up. So those there's a difference between core inflation and then just inflation in general. The point that I've made over and over again through the years is the two issues that people really make their mind up on voting is personal safety and economic safety. Those are visceral issues to people. They feel them in their gut. So no government report can say to them, hey, you should be feeling better. Either I walk down the street and feel safe at night through my neighborhood, or I don't. You can flash a million crime statistics telling me that it's safe. If I don't feel safe, it doesn't matter. And I think that's what's important. We keep hearing these reports on national news saying that crime is actually down. Well, if you live in or around Washington, D.C., you may not travel to D.C. much, but everywhere in Northern Virginia, Maryland, whatever, you're seeing these incidents of crime. And I say all that because until the narrative changes, whether it's fentanyl, immigration, crime, the rising prices of things, people are going to believe that things are going in the wrong direction. That's not a good thing for Biden right now. I always say, I mean, right now, people have a very different memory of the Trump years because we're not seeing them in real time. And so for a lot of people, they go, well, it was a lot better then. And that's the biggest narrative that I think the Biden campaign is going to be fighting, is that crime is perceived to be as big of an issue. Safety, economic security weren't issues that were people dealing with. And as long as immigration, whether it's fentanyl, crime, trafficking, reports of people coming over the border that are on the terrorist watch list subside, which I don't think they will, then that's going to be a problem. The last thing I'll just say is one of the biggest issues that the Biden campaign has to deal with is this issue of not age, but mental acuity, physical prowess. And unless the guy becomes Benjamin Button, it's not going to fix itself. They cannot. I mean, when we're having a discussion about what should they do after a conversation with Netanyahu, and you have to wonder, can he actually go out and hold his own? That's a problem. And so, and it doesn't get better. And that's the issue that I think Biden's going to continue to face.
Yep. Tony, question or comment?
Question. I want to talk Nebraska real quickly. I always thought it was smart that Nebraska gave away electoral vote to others, but I see downside to this, and I want to ask you all, doesn't that make Nebraska basically irrelevant? The congressional delegation irrelevant? No media market buys in these big elections for one delivering of one vote. One extra vote. I thought Maine is the same position. It's like the presidential campaigns pay attention, even if for a little bit, it delivers something to the state.
Well, I mean, there's the trade-off as almost everything with the Electoral College, right? If they keep it the way it is, they get a lot of the Omaha TV stations are happy and they'll receive some presidential attention. And obviously, if they change the law, it all goes away. On the other hand, this ain't beanbag, and everyone knows, I believe, probably almost everybody on this call, there's a scenario where that electoral vote would decide if Joe Biden got 269 or 270. And so, it's not a far-fetched scenario. He wins Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and that congressional district, and he wins. So I prefer that there be more states in play. And so my view is it'd be great to have that there. But again, just for the pure politics of it, it's a different thing. I don't want to run over, and there's one thing I want to do. Can you bring everybody back up on the screen? Thank you for the question, folks. We're figuring out how to do this and how we could best make it of interest to you. Bring everybody back up if you would. I'd love just a show of hands. Raise your hand if you'd like this to be daily at 8:30. Daily at 8:30, which is when we're doing it today. Raise your hand if you'd like that. If 8:30 is, I'm asking about the time here. 8:30 Eastern time. Raise your hand, 8:30 Eastern. Raise your hand if you'd prefer it be at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Raise your hand. Everyone wants to sleep in. No one wants it earlier. Would people like it? Raise your hand if you'd like it later than 8:30 Eastern time. One hand goes up. So people aren't really voting. So my market research is failing. We will be back to do more of these. You'll hear from us through the normal channels. You will get a replay of this if you missed the top, or if you want to share it with your friends. We'd urge you to share it with your friends, because we obviously want to have as many people be part of this, the morning meeting as possible. So Sean and Tim, closing comment of a sentence, if you'd like.
And we got a long way to go. I'm excited. If you're a political junkie, this is going to be a great election season.
Yeah. Tim?
Love this format. I love taking questions, and I will say every time I come on here, I actually feel a little bit better talking to, capital RP real people. So I've really enjoyed this.
Okay. Thanks to those of you who raised your hand to ask questions. Sorry we didn't fit them in, but we do feel it's important to begin and end on time, to respect your time. And again, you'll hear from us soon about when the next morning meeting will convene. Thank you. Have a great day.